more theoretically, I want to go back to a seminal paper published by the economist Ronald Coase. And it was Coase who first asked the question in a theoretical sense, why do corporations even exist? Namely, if the free market is as good as it's supposed to be, why aren't we all just individual, independent agents buying and selling amongst ourselves to accomplish the world's work? Why do corporations with hierarchical controls ever stand a chance in the free market? And what he came up with was this notion of generalized transaction cost, namely that the inefficiencies of the marketplace led to some costs that were so expensive for the market to function that it was better to organize corporations within the sea of the free market so that they could handle these transaction costs more efficiently. Okay. Now that's all, highly theoretical.
Sure.
But it's proven to be a great way to characterize systems, and that's why Ron Coase got his Nobel Prize, that among other things, for having these abstruse ideas that actually did do a good job of describing how the world seems to function. Where I'm getting at with this is I think tokens used for incentives allow us to restructure the way what we currently call corporations. It allows us to sort of create a next generation of corporation, which is more peer-to-peer, and which, rather than having a rigid, I'm inside and you're outside, becomes more of a semi-permeable membrane through which tokens are passed amongst customers, employees, what we would traditionally think of as stockholders, amongst that whole community. And again, I have to acknowledge that semi-permeable membrane analogy I owe to a colleague. It's not original with me. But I think the transformation of the corporation, the sort of corporation plus plus,
sure,
or corporation 2.0, or if we're on 2.0, 3.0, whatever,
just the next version,
is very much possible to allow the token to be one of the signaling mechanisms in the economy for a kind of real-time redistribution where value creation is following in a much more real-time way, where the allocation of credit is following the value creation.
Sure.
That would be a fourth.
Okay.
Let me finally come to a fifth. Okay. And my fifth is, if you can believe it, cryptocurrencies. Now, the thing I'm trying to emphasize is I very much believe that we're going to see fiat currencies, namely fiat meaning someone just says this is a currency, okay? Not sovereign backed though.
Okay.
I think we definitely will see part of Satoshi's and many others' dreams realized. But now you see how conservative our perspective is on this space, because we see that as a Generation 5 difficulty to get it right.
Right.
And so while we are bullish in general on the concept of the cryptocurrency as a mechanism to solve hopefully somebody's problem sometime,
right,
that doesn't mean that what it means is we think we're very much at a nascent stage with cryptocurrencies.
Right.
That's a very, very difficult problem to tune right. And I do think that there are all sorts of places where good ideas are starting. But for those that have great ambitions, my advice is start small. And what I mean by that is, remember, eBay originally was a Beanie Baby trading site.
No, Pez dispenser.
A Pez, you have it even better, right? Those classic Pez dispensers.
Right.
And then it added Beanie Babies. Touche. Okay? And some of those Pez dispensers are pretty cool.
They are cool.
Okay. Amazon, even though they had great ambitions from the get-go, okay, originally focused on books.
Right. A book reseller.
And so I have more confidence in those that are trying to solve a modest problem and solve it well, and solve it in the near term, and begin to generate revenue as a result, than I do for those who admirably are trying to create be all, solve all foundations that take on the character of if we build it, they will come, rather than trying to solve a very focused group of people's near-term problem.
So do you see this as the approach that both industry and government should take towards it? I mean, to me, the greatest implementation of blockchain, of course, will be probably at the governmental level, simply because it will impact everyone. Is this part of the reason? I mean, everyone would like to wave that magic wand and say, we have now this solution that solves all these problems within government because it impacts everyone. But say, start small, solve a particular problem, using actually your surety example, solving the problem of patents and trademarks.
For example.
Start there. Let's get that down and get it right, and then start to expand into the additional aspects of things.
Sure, but I would not necessarily say, I take your point in part about government. Government should act thoughtfully and improving the way it handles its essential functions. Remember, you are talking to a not-so-closet libertarian. Government should handle its essential functions more efficiently and effectively.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm not suggesting that governments aren't allowed to have currencies. Okay. I think anybody should be allowed, so why not governments as well? But I don't necessarily think that government has to intervene, but for lightly, in many areas.
Sure.
Where it has some supervisory role, but not necessarily a central or, or not necessarily a central, that's its job kind of role.
Got it.
Now, when you say industry, to me, industry is both existing corporations as well as two guys in a garage. So more power to all of them.
Okay.
It's funny to me when you see those that philosophically align themselves with the sort of letting 1,000 flowers bloom and letting everyone do what they want to do in that libertarian sense, decrying the right of corporations to do what they want to do, a la J.P. Morgan. Isn't
Sure.
it a free country?
Absolutely.
Needs, I think, to be something that is as good for the goose as it is for the gander.
Sure.
If you've got a better mousetrap, build it.
Great.
And if you want to put J.P. Morgan out of business, just build a better.
Okay. Now, I started this interview by asking you the question, are you Satoshi Nakamoto? And you've said no. Well, given that the cryptographic community, both at the time that you started creating this and now, is so very, very small. If you're not Satoshi, who is?
Next question.
Okay. Are there any more secrets that blockchain is going to reveal to us? That we're going to come out with something that will be as transformative as what we understand it now. And the way that I look at it is this way, is that using the internet as the example, that original design concept of the internet was very limited. And then the secrets that came out is that we could do so much more with it. And they were secrets not because that people were hiding them, it's that they weren't discovered yet. So do you think that there are, and do you perceive that we're like on the brink of a new breakthrough in that? I mean, you brought up things like Google. Well, Google wasn't the first search engine. They were actually long after, a number of them. Amazon wasn't really anything unique at the time. eBay wasn't unique at the time. Even Apple struggled for years and years before actually that impetus, the thing that pushed them over to becoming really spectacular.
Right.
Do you see that we're on the horizon? I mean, are any of those things on the horizon, those discoveries right there? and we just have to push a little harder to actually discover them.
Absolutely. But I want to say it in a broader sense. In other words, I get that it's kind of neat having had some role to play in the early blockchain space, that I get this, I gain something of a platform to offer my perspective.
Sure.
But I don't tie myself to just the blockchain. To me, there are really two long-term drivers here. The first is peer-to-peer connectivity between every person on the planet. And the second is increasing computational power to mediate that peer-to-peer interaction. That's the long-term driver. And blockchain is, in a sense, just a natural consequence of when you get to a certain amount of connectivity and computational power, there's something that you can peer-to-peer.
Right.
So to me, the internet itself is a phenomenon like that, but something like Wikipedia is a phenomenon that's emergent because we had increased connectivity,
right,
and increased computational power. And so for me, these effects of new ways to re-engineer the social network, the human-to-human network, are just going to come in wave after wave after wave as we increase connectivity and lower its transaction costs.
right.
And as we have increased computational power that we can bring to bear in mediating our interactions. Those are the two grand drivers. And we're just going to see revolution after revolution after revolution. Do I think blockchain is there for the long term? Absolutely. And again,
are cryptos, is Bitcoin going to be there?
It'll definitely be in the historical record. No question. No question. And it'll be an immutable historical record.
That's true too.
I have a myopic view of blockchain that there is a fundamental benefit to cryptographically interlinking documents and having them widely distributed. That creates that immutable ledger, that immutable record. But we're going to see wave after wave after wave of value add. We haven't spoken at all, for example, about smart contracts.
No.
Which I think
I tried to keep this limited.
Which I think have great value, but I think we're going to see a much more gradual and incremental adoption of very simple things first before they grow. But they really are built on top of an immutable record that all can agree on.
Right.
They're also built on top of being able to quantize and fractionalize. So we see that wave. Again, my dissertation was in artificial intelligence. Do I think that's going to have a big impact building on top of and in addition to what's happening with blockchain? Absolutely. And we look at all of that at UGen, but to each its own time and appropriate phase in the development.
Right. I want to thank you actually for appearing here on Blockchain360. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. Like you've pointed out, there were many things that we didn't discuss, and that was just because of I respect your time. Again, it's been a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much.
Thanks for the great questions.
Anyway.
It's been a great back and forth as far as I'm concerned.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.